Hello, my name is Stephen Parry, and in the next few minutes I'm going to be talking about bold visions and harsh realities. So what is this going to be about? Well, we're in the midst of a lot of chaotic change and uncertainty, and I want to talk about the implications for the way that we lead organisations, how we make them more robust to change and how they can exploit change by becoming more adaptive. I'm also going to be focusing on not just the type of leadership, but the change in the relationships between leaders, management and staff. And I'll also be talking about what does it feel like to actually work and to thrive in an adaptive organisation. Now, some of you may have embarked on a number of transformation programs already, a common one being moving from agile in the workplace to agility across the business. I want to talk about that move to agility across the business in adaptability terms, but more specifically about what it feels like to work in a new type of organisation and where adaptiveness is actually taking us in the long term. So, without further ado, let's get on to the next slide. My name is Stephen Parry. I've been in the business of transforming large organisations and helping them differentiate in the marketplace by becoming much more adaptive with a viewpoint of creating higher levels of value and differentiated values so that we beat the pants off the competition. And I'll be going through some of the techniques that I've been using for many years now in doing just that. So you can read the slide and the bio at your own convenience. Okay, so what can we say about today? The times they are a-changing. A song by Bob Dylan, a songwriter from the 60s. Some of you might not have been born then, but he was a bit of a prophet in his own time. He's still going strong today. He's got a new album out. And for a generation, he came to represent everything that was changing in the 60s, the cultural revolution, the whole change in societies that were manifest then. And the song, The Times They Are A-Changin', was an icon for everything that was happening on all forms of culture, all forms of technology, everything that was happening in the new Renaissance after the Second World War. I'm going to say that this song is still valid today because everything is changing. We're going through an absolute tornado of change. Now, Bob Dylan might not be a business analyst. That leaves it to other people like me, you, who are listening to this, to try and figure out how we navigate this landscape, this environment that we're in. It's a constant change, as it says on the slide. The economy is going in many directions. Some people are benefiting, other people are going through terrible times. The global landscape in terms of trade wars, shifts in power, the technology, digitization, you name it, the list is almost endless. But what I found that the traditional view of change is we try to make an organization robust to change. But very often we are frozen by change. We don't know which direction to move. And then there may be a reorganization. And again, people will freeze. Will I survive at this reorganization? What's going to happen to me? So instead of embracing the change and looking at this as a great opportunity, we're often frozen into stasis. And I want to turn that on its head. I want to think about how we can change our relationships between leaders, management and their staff to see this as an opportunity to increase wealth, stability, security and an investment in our people long term to keep them challenged and finding new solutions to not only survive but thrive by beating the competition. but we have to change our thinking about our approach to change and how we respond to change. That feeling, thinking and feeling, has to shift right across large swathes of the business to be much more optimistic and less scared about the change, to be able to do more testing, a minimal viable product, rapid testing, and finding out what new forms of value we can create for the customer in this new emerging tornado. There are lots more niches to explore, but we need to have the confidence to go and do that. And this work climate, as I call it, we'll be digging deep into that work climate in this presentation. So before I go any further, let me just talk about what is an adaptive business. It's not just an agile business, it goes beyond that. It's a change that goes beyond mere processes and efficiencies. It changes the very fabric of the organization, how we go about designing, building and operating the organization, and who does most of that, which is really key. The other thing I want to touch on is we really need to rethink what the organization is for. It is not to keep pushing the same products and services and maybe discounting them, enticing people to buy our products. It is about creating a wider variety of value, of services and products that meet our customers' purpose, not just delighting them. We've gone beyond customer purpose. We've gone beyond even customer experience. We have to be delivering a stream, online pipeline of new products and services, and we need to engage the ingenuity and the willing contribution of our staff. And what that means is agility at a business level with adaptiveness is an investment in the workforce, because it's easy to copy just about everything else, your methods, your approaches, but it is harder to steal all your people that you've developed in this way. All right. And even if they copy what you do in terms of your products and services, your adaptiveness and the change in relationship inside with the mental models that you have, you're on to the next best thing. You're always in the lead and you get to disrupt instead of being disrupted. The thing to think about here, the marketplace is always evolving. The customer needs are always changing. And we need to use great parts of our organization, not just the departments that are dedicated to product and development, but other parts of the business that usually don't get involved in product development, but are engaged with clients and customers and understand what's really going on in that world and bringing that in and then being part of the product and development cycle for new products and services. And what I found is that people who are not dedicated, like the product development department, to developing products, come up with really great ideas, and some of them end up world beating because they're not encumbered by a particular way of thinking about products and services. And then, yes, you can get the experts in product and development to develop that, but the ideas are out there. And I always get frustrated when people say, oh, we lack innovation. You lack engagement, deep engagement with understanding your customers and using bigger parts of your organization to do that. The ideas are out there, but very often we are looking and we're looking for the golden nugget. When there's all this great stuff out there, it's as if we're standing on a mountain of diamonds. The customers are telling us, but the marketing and product guys are looking for something else. So we're standing on a mountain of diamonds, frantically digging for gold. And we have to see the value in the diamonds, and that those diamonds may be rough, but they're coming from our staff who engage with our customers. And there's a wealth of them. Okay, so let's just talk about an adaptive business purpose. Adaptiveness is about continuously driving new forms of value to the customer. It's on stream all the time. And you get in bigger niches around your customer base. It's about establishing differentiation, as I said before, but it's about creating a challenging, secure workplace for your staff. Because unless you're doing that, they may feel that they're designing their job away if they specialize in the delivery of one product or service when they're trying to develop others. This becomes a social contract between leaders, managers and staff, and I will be going into that. It's about maintaining customer value with our customers, enabling that continuous value creation. And adaptiveness is a workforce capability, as I said before, and you have to think about it in those terms. And we're engaging everybody in creativity and collaboration and focusing on business and customer outcomes. Okay, I'm giving you a bold vision of how that might work in an adaptive organization, and I think this is where agility is going over the longer term. But what are the constraints? There are many constraints in the marketplace, but there are even more constraints inside the business. And I want to touch on 3 of those at the moment. So I'm talking about the biggest constraint in most organizations, particularly in this time of change, is work overburden. Everybody has too much work. There's too much change being asked for. There's too much work that is just clearing up after things that have gone wrong. And we are losing focus on the customer. We are even in some cases losing our ability to do today's work without even trying to think about how do we scale up and get ourselves ready for tomorrow's work. So we really have to look at what work is really necessary and what work are we loading our managers and our staff, and does it create value or does it create work for work's sake? And I have a saying, unless you can see a clear line of sight between every piece of work that you do, whether you're the CEO or someone in HR or somebody on a help desk, if there isn't a clear line of sight between the work you're doing and customer outcomes and value, you have no idea if your work is creating value for your customer or if you're delivering waste wrapped around your product, and that just annoys your customer and it puts up your costs. It also frustrates your employees. The other constraint internally is what I call transparency. We have managers, leaders and staff. They have different views of what's going on. Their perspectives are very different. So if you want an engaging, willing workforce, and I include the managers and leaders of that, we need to have some common views of what we are looking at. And there are some techniques for doing that. Visualization is good for that, but we need to be looking at the same visualization and seeing and having conversations with how do the senior managers understand that visualization? How do frontline staff look at the same visualization and see how the strategy is manifesting in how they do the work or is preventing them do the work? How is that same picture that is shared between everybody for the manager who has to do the planning, develop the capability? This is a 3-way conversation looking at the same picture. Because transparency is not looking at all the reports, because the reports are different dependent upon who is looking them. Transparency is a conversation. It is a process, a part of visualization, and it is a discipline to learn about how other parts of the business see what's going on and what is the interconnectivity of those components and do they all add up. Managers and staff need the space to move into making decisions. So this isn't about devolving decision making. It's about senior mid-management and senior management getting back up to the top of the business, leaving space for mid-management and staff to grow into that space. And this is vital. This is not delegation. It's creating the space for people to grow into. You cannot implement agility and adaptiveness. You can only grow it. But if senior management are pushing down and micromanaging, chasing everything, overburdening, there is no space to grow. There's no flexibility to test. And there's less trust. You've got to create that space for people to grow. Don't implement, grow. And this has a direct relationship to decision making. I liken this to a three-layer wedding cake, which is the senior management, mid-management and staff, where the senior management are pushing down on the mid-staff, and then the mid-managers are pushing down on the frontline staff. So all these three layers are squashed into one, and there's no room to grow. But who is on the top layer looking out for the strategy, exploiting the ingenuity of the people if only they had time to express that ingenuity? So people at the top layer need to move up, the mid layer need to move up, and the staff need to move up, and the decision making that was normally done by senior management goes to mid-management, and a lot of the decision making that was done by the mid-management are going to staff. Now this calls for a lot of trust, and in a wedding, a good relationship is based on trust. But if you don't create that space and you're expecting people to step up, well, that's going to be a wedding made in hell. So we are talking about leadership creating possibilities for new ways of working and thinking in the organization, and people being given space. So what is this difference between these relationships? But before I get into that, one of the things that our research into work climates, which I'll come on to shortly, has found that those organizations that are either going lean or going agile in the workplace and agility at the top of the business, or even adaptiveness, the biggest constraint on how far you can go with that is how you choose to compete. And I'll prove this in some following slides. How you compete in the market will determine how far your agility program will get. It'll determine how far your lean program or even your adaptive program will go. It creates a ceiling beyond which it's very difficult to get past. So the biggest thing we need to think about here is, how do you choose to compete? And if you want all the benefits of agile and business adaptiveness, we have to change the basis on which we compete to get the full ROI from agility and adaptiveness. Okay, I've been mentioning work climates once or twice now. So what is a work climate? We all experience this. When we go into work, it's our thinking, feelings and perceptions about what it's like to work here. Our freedom, can we talk to managers? Do we have good levels of trust? Do we talk to people in other departments about the work? But a climate is not just how anyone thinks. A climate are the combined perceptions. Okay, you might have people that think the right way, but not enough think that way to create a climate that actually predicts how you are going to operate in the marketplace. So we've developed a whole set of climate measures, and I will share those. And we'll talk about how climate influences how well you work as a business, whatever approach to business improvement you take. It is these perceptions that give rise to the behaviour and the performance. They're inextricably linked, as I will demonstrate. And I'm going to demonstrate this by taking two polarized views. I'm going to talk about a climate that is what I would call an industrial design. That comes from very siloed, making components, and then components come together. It's a sort of manufacturing, and people tend to focus on their little bit and pass it on. Nobody's in charge of the whole thing. They only need to know their own little bit. And a lot of silo work comes from this thinking, and we have measurement related to each of those silos, and we have very little collaboration across those silos. And I call that the industrial model. If you're in here, then you're following the 99% of businesses that follow this model. So we have to change that in some way. And I'm thinking now about what an adaptive organization feels like. And this diagram, I'm going to show just 5 traits. What is the leadership style? What is the customer experience as a result of these climates? And who is responsible for improvement? What is the management focus? And what is the competitive basis that helps drive that? So if you give me a moment, I'm going to go through these one by one. In the adaptive design, the leadership style is listen and adapt. That is the leadership listening to the outside world and what the great majority of their staff are telling them about the customer's world, bringing that in. This is not the voice of the customer. This is a constructed way of segmenting what customers really want and the new opportunities that could create new products and services. And what are the constraints that are there? So management need to have a different form of engagement with their mid-management and their staff. You compare that to direct and control, which is this is the number of widgets we need to produce, these are the targets you've got to hit, and now you go out and very often you're doing your busy, bang, bang, best to get it done. And you hope that somewhere it's all joined up. So what is the customer experience? Well, in the adaptive world, the customer experience is really you're asking them what's happening in their world with the use of your products. What else could we be doing? Are there different ways that we are using this? And the customer said, well, I would really like that. And you'll say, well, we don't do that at the moment, but hey, that could be something that we could think about. Thank you very much. But in the industrial model, that would be seen as wasting time to get on to the next transaction with the customer, because we are moving from relational and personal to transactional and processed. That's the problem, and we have to flip that. Another thing is who is responsible for improvement. And in the industrial design, it's usually centralized specialists. It's often suggestion schemes. But the actual experimentation, the discovery of what customers want is usually left out of that. It's usually about internal improvement. Nothing about the outside world because nothing is coming in. Whereas frontline experimentation and learning is the standard way that we deliver work at the front line with the managers. You can see there's a very different relationship developing, and that relationship is reflected in people's performance. Now, if you as a manager are focused on KPIs for increasing staff utilization up over 100%, you'll get over 100% utilization if you have overburden because you're working them overtime to clear your backlogs, all right? And then you're burning everybody out. Everybody's doing their busy, bang, bang best with nothing actually improving because you can't get on top of it. Whereas the management focus in the adaptive organization is what ideas are people bringing forward that can better serve the customer? What ideas are our staff and our mid-managers bringing forward that we can better deliver more effectively with less waste to our clients? Now, this comes down to the competitive basis I mentioned earlier on. In the industrial model, that is about getting high volumes. But the high volumes means I am competing on cost. So I want to keep my costs of people down. So I want to spend the time my staff spend with customers. In fact, I'll try to automate that. And very often we automate the waste that we are sending to customers. And automating waste is waste times 20 and 30. Don't automate the waste. That's really waste. You need to be automating the value. But people are not looking for new value. They think that what they create today is the value. But it's wrapped around with all sorts of waste which you're delivering alongside the customer. And it's not a good way of engaging the willing contribution and ingenuity of your staff. So the competitive basis in an adaptive organization is very much about being trusted advisors, that the client or the consumers know you're always bringing something out that meets my needs. And you'll get a reputation of not just giving the one product, but you're building other things around that consistently. And your client and your customer is growing with your organization as well as your products and services. Now, the thing to think about here is each of those models, the industrial one and the adaptive, create very different climates. So I want you to think about how that feels to be in a silo, just hitting the numbers on whatever piece of work we are doing, never seeing how that impacts the customer, never seeing if you are passing work on to other people that they have to redo, never understanding what the next person in line actually requires from you because you're meeting a local specification. To another organization where you're talking cross-functionally, you're talking cross-hierarchical, you are having conversations about what meets the purpose of the customer and how we are delivering that. In fact, we might even repurpose the business around new products and services to differentiate ourselves. We are having conversations with the leadership about these opportunities and where we might go and where we might want to invest in new products and services. One of the things I needed to do a number of years ago was I needed to create a very simple model for which I could then create a diagnostic and explain the difference between an industrial model and an adaptive model. And it goes like this. It's my adaptive donut. That's what it's been coined as. It's very simply this. There are four areas of a business that I want to contrast. And the industrial model and the adaptive model have very different solutions to these problems that I'm just talking about. When I go into an organization, I look and I see how they engage with their customers and their clients. Do they deeply understand? And I don't mean bringing back the voice of the customer. I mean, if you're in a business to business, that the people that are engaging with the customer, whether it's salespeople, account management, service desk, anybody, is understanding what the purpose of that business is. And you acquire their business goals. And you test your products and services on does it achieve the business goals of your business to business person. Not in an industrial model, did it meet the specification? It's a very, very different set of information. And you can see it's a very different set of practices and behavior. So deeply understanding and engaging with customers and acquiring their business outcomes, then you are learning how to design around purpose, leaving you free to design new products and services that meet the purpose. Unlike the industrial one is saying, I just need to push this one widget onto you because the purchase is to sell you as much as I can. So I define myself by my product or service, and the other one, in the adaptive, I define myself by the value I create. Completely different outlook. Learning and sharing. Okay, this is bringing this in. Do I share it with the team? Do I share it with other parts of the organization? Do I share what I find routinely and collaboratively with senior management? I remember when I was working with an Australian subsidiary of a European organization, and I said to them, when was the last time that you had a conversation about your customer base and your issues with your senior management? And they said the last time we spoke to them about such things was 4 years ago. So just understand how disconnected the management are. Okay, if we don't have the same view, the same outlook, we're just pushing things and hoping for the best. And in today's world, we can't hope for the best. We must work for the best. We not only must think outside the box, we have to work outside the box with our colleagues. And therefore we have to share this information. And then leading and choosing what things to develop for the customer, but leaving this at a mid-management level. At a senior level, you want the ingenuity to be coming out, not pushing it in there. Remember, it's about growing, leaving space. Of course, they don't just go out and do whatever they like, because it is sensing and adapting. And between those two, we have time to think what's best for us, what's best for the customer, and is there something we want to go down? Okay, so it's not listen and comply to our customers. The other thing then is improvement. We might improve, and improvement is about taking waste out, no doubt about it, because it's a massive amount of waste that we're delivering along with our customer. I have seen some jobs that should be taking one person one day, where it takes 10 people 10 weeks, but it's one day's work. So that's the way the work is designed, and that's just crazy. That is really inefficient. So this way of working creates this work climate, and I want to deep dive now into that, because we run a diagnostic, and let me talk about a climate, and think about it in weather terms, like we've got climate change and things like that. So it's a bit like the weather, and if you think about Europe, or even right across the United States, what you have is the United States and Europe have their combined weather, but that's not very useful. It becomes more useful when you look at the weather in the different countries, or in the United States in the different states, because there are different feelings and perceptions and cultures in that, on how they approach work, what's more important, okay? And then within the state or within the country, you can deep dive then into the different business units or teams. And what a climate measure does, it measures the whole organization, and you have an aggregate of all of that. But that's not useful, is when you go down to the different business units, the countries, you can then see which ones have the aptitude, because of the way they're set up, either industrial or adaptive, that would enable them to go the full whack to becoming an adaptive organization. And this has cut down my transformation time from 5 years to 2 years, simply because we are looking at the parts of the business where the climate is already conducive to using Agile, Kanban and agility. All right, and then the other areas that need a bit of work, you can spend time on that, but it is not the same formula. We don't make everybody do the same thing, because that makes it fail. So the climate works are identifying what the climate is across the business. The climate also works at different levels of the organization, and we can see what the climate is in those different areas, in those countries, what the climate is at different levels of the hierarchy. You could be at the top, out in the bright sunshine, thinking everything is great, whereas the frontline staff could be at the bottom of all this weather system, and there's something in between, and they are being rained on, there's snow, sleet, and it's very cold, and it's not conducive to good work, trust, and involvement. So we can cut this both ways. And I'm going to be showing you some of the global climate for illustration purposes today, but in other presentations that will follow this, we can look at the deep dive. Okay, so let's look at the work climate. I call this the business behaviours and dynamics. So I talked about engaging and understanding. And we run a survey, it's an online survey. We work with a number of universities because we are looking at climate measures. And these are quite robust and have been known about for over 30 years. But we've looked at what are the attributes of an adaptive organisation and what the attributes of an industrial organisation. And we are looking at what attributes are we seeing and how strong are they. So engaging and understanding. How much freedom and decision making, which is question A. And we ask that question in a number of ways. And if you answer it one way, it'll show whether you're an adaptive organization or an industrial. And we check that with other measures. And there's a whole host of statistical management and controls that come out that tell us what these factors are and where they cluster to form a climate. So also, what is that customer facing activity? Is that transactional or is that relational? Okay, and do they gather intelligence about the customer, or are we just on to the next item? Okay, and do people share that information, if they are getting it, within their team? We move on to learning and sharing. Okay, we've got some information about the outside world, how we deliver end-to-end across all our business processes. Are we achieving good value for money for the customer, or are we delivering waste? So if you need to share this information, you need to have better understanding of the rest of the organization. Who does what? This becomes networked information. This is now moving to a collaboration model, because you might find something, but you need to know which part of the organization you can have a conversation. Do I share this business intelligence about our customers, not marketing intelligence? This is intelligence. These are the diamonds in your business that we are picking up, not digging for gold in the marketing intelligence, because all your competitors can get that. But this is the business intelligence you can gather by directly engaging and understanding. But now we need to make sense of it. Let's learn and share this. Let's learn it with our team, across our function, across other functions that may be able to contribute to this, and with senior management. This is a collaborative conversation. From this, we get transparency. From this, we can now start thinking about leading and choosing lower down what we're going to work on, having talked to the senior management, having talked to the end-to-end business on how we might do this, having brought in people who can help develop that product and help deploy that across. So this is an engaging, learning, leading organization. And improving and adaptive. That is the final one. Improvement is not to be sneered at, but adaptiveness leads to differentiation. Adaptiveness leads to new revenue stream. Adaptiveness with differentiation and revenue streams leads to long-term prosperity and job security. So you get the social contract from all your staff, managers and leaders. But they're all changing. The process that delivers, the products and services that we influence. We are looking at the influence different parts of the business have on other functions and on their business processes. So we're going to look at this now, and that needs to be brought together with that collaboration talk, and that requires a lot of trust between managers, leaders and staff. Without this, it doesn't work. No change program. No matter how well you plan it, if there's no trust between those three groups, no transformation is going to deliver the full ROI. And what I say, if there is no trust, there is no transformation. And if you've got a legacy where you've, as senior management team, you've lost the trust because of really top-down, draconian things that you might have had to do for survival, you have to clean that up. It's no good going to the workforce and saying, yes, we did all that, but now we want you to trust us to do this because it's in all our interest. They will not believe you. You have to really gain their trust. And there's only one way I know that management can gain the trust of their staff, and that is first to demonstrate they are worthy of trust. In other words, management, if you've lost the trust, need to become trustworthy. And that is a tough place to be, but is entirely proper if you want the relationships, if you want the involvement and the willing contribution. You need to fly air cover because some things are going wrong because we are testing. But you put in fail-safe methods. But as senior management, you don't beat up people who do it wrong. I remember one organization that said, yes, we would like you to test, and It's okay if you fail, but don't repeat the mistake. Well, it's gone. It's so easily blown. So that gives us the work climate. And there's an adaptive work climate and there's an industrial. And what I'm now going to show you are, against those behaviours, how strong an industrial organisation is, an industrial design is, and this is a real case study I'm going into now. And the measurement is across those 4 dimensions, and then there are 3 dimensions on. It's pretty weak, which means it's not a great one. There's enough to say there's a climate, but it's not robust, it's quite woolly. Then there's medium, and medium is okay, and then there's high performance. And we're going to see that right now. So what we have here is an industrial work climate. And we can see, okay, I will tell you, this was a cloud operation. In IT services and cloud operations, application support, applications development, a whole plethora of enterprise architecture, designs, and help desks and technical help desk, highly technically qualified. And they prided themselves on being top-notch, engaged with the customer. But the model that they had designed for their people to work in was based on a mass production model, as we can see with this. So I'll draw your attention to these 3. Freedom and decision making, very low. Customer facing activity, very transactional. Okay, sharing other people with the team. Yes, they shared with the team. But what were they sharing? About the transactional stuff. Learning and sharing. Okay, how much organizational understanding? Very little. Okay, were they sharing it across their own function? Yes, they were. Were they sharing what they found about the customer? Well, they weren't even asking. With other functions? No, they weren't. Were they sharing this information about how good or bad their business is working with senior management? But I tell you what, they were all hitting their SLAs, and they turned out to be melon SLAs. And if you haven't heard the term, it's a measurement that's green on the outside but red on the inside, because that's what the customer is seeing. These are internal measures against SLAs that ultimately don't matter to the customer. But we were producing that, so we weren't even picking up that we were bad. This was not even a good mass production model. This was not even a good direct and control. This one was more like command and hope, as we can see. Look, leading and choosing. Okay, performance management. They weren't even performance management on a mass production industrial approach. Yet they look at K and L, they were doing things for customers, responding to customer issues. But what issues? They were responding to failures of delivery when things broke down. That is so much yesteryear. Your product should be impeccable. Yet these organizations were still designed around continually fixing repeated failure because they weren't taking that out, because that was institutionalized. They were still delivering it to the customer. The employees were designed out and the customer were designed out of this. But the biggest killer on this is improving and adapting. Not even a good mass production model, as I said. Employee influence on products and services, almost non-existent. On managing practices, how I choose what methods to use. Do I use my Agile method? Do I use a bit of Kanban? Or am I rigid? I have to follow the process. And it's about disciplined compliance instead of disciplined experimentation. This is what was keeping this business stuck. This is what was making it feel like a miserable place. This is what was creating for the staff. They heard the rhetoric the senior management were giving to their customers, and those same customers would then be giving it back in the year-old conversations with the senior management that it is not good enough, and the senior management would then be going back to the staff saying, you've got to do better. They were looking in the wrong place. I'm going to contrast that now with an adaptive organization. And I'll tell you now, this is the same organization 18 months later on an adaptive model. So we can see customer intelligence gathering had gone way up. Customer facing activity completely changed in the conversation. Okay, they were now starting to learn about other parts of the organization, but it was still fairly weak. They were sharing across their function. They were sharing with other functions, and they were sharing with, and they were really good at this. So now there's collaboration, there's more trust, more information, more transparency, and now better decision making lower in the organization. Okay, because the performance management here was not how many widgets we do, is what value you created for the customer and how could we reuse that to create additional value. So we were rewarding ingenuity, not how many widgets that we did, and we were rewarding business outcomes and client and customer goals. Not did we meet our internal goals, and by the way, we were hitting the old measures by not focusing on the melon measures. All those melons turned green from the outside all the way in, but we weren't looking at that. We were looking at the outcomes, and we were doing the things that got the right outcomes, and then we were delivering the right thing, efficiency. Look at this. The improving and adapting. What do you think the willing contribution? People starting to get involved. People having critical thinking about what works, what doesn't work. Their knowledge about the customers increased. We very often see, you don't need to talk to the customer. All right, you just pass that on. We are just a black box. Well, if you're just a black box, you're in an industrial model and you're going to be out of date very soon because that's easily disrupted. So what about the people? Well, this is a survey of those same people 18 months later. This, I was hoping for good numbers, but this was way beyond my expectations. If we look at here, this is about 1,500 people responded to this. They feel improved working relationship with other teams, including their management. They understand other teams' processes and their challenges. Why? So that we could collaborate. They were even sharing their resources without recourse to going to senior management to say, I need to go and help over here because that's what's impacting my business. And they were sharing back and forth. And we had forums called Big Picture Collaboration about what was impacting the business, and people moved things around when there were blockages. Overburden was addressed. Any work that one department was passing on quickly to another with all the waste, that went away. The amount of work that was being passed reduced by, in some cases, 40%, because the work that they were passing on created no value. They have transparency about other teams and increased willingness to support each other, because we now have end-to-end outcome goals, not our siloed goals. We are able to openly discuss issues faced with other teams without the fear of conflict. Fear goes when trust comes in. They feel empowered to make the necessary relevant changes, and the ADAPT program, as we called it, is helping them be more effective end-to-end and across different countries. Because that graph that I showed you, they were in 4 different continents. And this works, but we have to change the relationship between staff, management, and leaders. Don't let people tell you you've got to change your thinking. Thinking doesn't change until we got trust and we change the nature of how we behave towards each other. Then we can learn the theories. Then we can learn all the other stuff. But trying to do that before you've got the trust, before you've changed the relationship, is really bad. And one more thing that I will finish on. There is a big drive to go to networked organizations. If you are going to go to a networked organization when your organization is not even a good mass production model, and they don't know how to collaborate and share information, which a networked organization would need to do, or they have very little knowledge about their organization. If you do that without your people being competent to run a networked organization, and your management able to work across those networked organizations on behalf of their staff, you will cripple your business and your performance will go down, and you will lose whatever little trust that you have, because you'd have revved up all the people and they'll have nowhere to go. But it needn't be like that. Change the relationships first, and your perspective about what being adaptive and what agility means at a business level. So if you have any questions, please just put them in the comment sections below. Subscribe on the channel, and I will answer any questions that you've got. This is just an entry, but it's everything to play for, and this is where I believe the best organizations have already gone. And I wish you luck on your journey to customer purpose. Thank you very much.